Good morning, everybody. My name is Frances Casnetta-Dice, and I'm president of the Houston East End Chamber of Commerce, and it's an honor to welcome you to our COVID-19 business webinar. We're very honored to have Troy Elmore of Sandler Training here today to speak to us about great salesmen are not born, they are made, which is very, very true. And right now during COVID-19, it's very important to be the best salesperson you are in any career that you have been. So thank you so much, Troy, for joining us today.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me, Francis.
Great. You're a repeat person and you're a wealth of knowledge. And everyone out there, I highly recommend you to follow Troy on his social media platforms and take down his email address and connect with him because he's a wealth of knowledge and we trust him dearly. So go ahead and get started, Troy.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Well, we'll get started. And so, you know, this was a big honor for me. I got to tell you, it's always, it's very humbling for me to be able to kind of do this stuff, especially when people right now are, I think sometimes need it more than ever, because I think one of the things that we're seeing is that when it comes to a sales perspective, the days of taking orders are not necessarily gone, but they're definitely few and far between. And so we have to figure out a different way to have better conversations, more productive conversations, especially with the people who, you know, are not giving a whole lot of their time up. So this is a second time I've been back, and again, we're going to do about an hour today. I'm going to give you a whole lot of tips and a whole lot of education. If you are getting copies of the notes and you want to follow page by page, there's going to be a lot more information in the notes that I'm actually going to cover today because I just don't have as much time. But I promise we'll cover as much as we can cover, and I think you can also type in questions in the question and answer form. And as we can, as we go through it, we're going to try to answer questions and not just wait till the very end. So here's how I want us to think about today, and it goes back to the title. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people who I think in my heart would be great salespeople, and I asked them, you know, would you ever want to pursue that? And they say, no. I could never do that. I'm not the type of person who could be a salesperson, you know. And I say, what do you mean? Well, salespeople are naturally born. You know, they have certain things that make them a great salesperson from birth. And I got to tell you, that's entirely not true. It's just not true. It's a myth. It's the biggest myth, I think, in sales, that salespeople are naturally born. There are naturally born bad salespeople. You know, you could probably argue that there are some innate qualities that make someone a better salesperson than another person, but it's usually not the things we think. And so as we go through this today, we'll talk about it, but just know that if you are a type of person who says, I don't think I'm a natural born salesperson, that's probably a good thing. Right? It's probably a good thing. And know that sales is all about a process. It's really more process than it is anything. And if you can learn a process and you can reinforce it, you can be great at sales. And if you're great at sales, it allows you to do everything. Because you can, whatever your industry is, whatever you're in, lawyers say they're not salespeople. Well, you don't get to do law until you sell something, right? Doctors, it's the same thing, right? There's people who have more and more choices. So anybody can learn how to sell. We're going to go through this. I'm going to give you some tips. So as we go through this, because we're more on a webinar than anything, you may or may not be able to see this, but I'll tell you, people generally have, and they're going to share this on the screen with you guys so you can see this. People generally have very similar frustrations across every industry. I've been doing this for 17 years, and what I see is that there are some common things people tell me over and over and over. Business owners and or salespeople. The common things they tell me are things like, price seems to be a huge factor. I sell value, I try to convince them why we're better, and price still keeps coming up as one of the main things why people don't buy, and I have a hard time differentiating myself. That's one. The other thing I hear all the time is people just, I will do presentations for them, I will show them why we're great, I expect them to make a decision, and they don't. They give me the, we'll think about it, we'll see, get back with me, and you wind up doing the follow-up game, all right? The other things I hear, and again, see if you fit into one of these as I'm going through this, because if you do, if you can grab one of these and we can solve it today, then it's worth your time. The other thing I hear is people telling me that I'm sick and tired of educating prospects and not getting any commitments. I almost feel like a huge unpaid consultant. I give them a lot of information and I just get nothing in return from it other than just educating them. They feel warm and fuzzy, but I don't get even a commit. I don't even get a no, but I definitely don't get the business. The other things out here is people are just, it's interesting. You have prospects who are so eager. They seem like they need something so bad, and then they disappear after you give them everything. That's another struggle out here. The last couple struggles. One is people will tell me that, I'm doing a lot of proposals. I'm working on a lot of deals, but for whatever reason, I can't get them closed. Just can't get them closed. And the last thing I hear is people are struggling just to find new prospects, or struggling to get people motivated to either return their call, return their email, and so on. And so if any of these are frustrations that you have, then today might be worthwhile listening to, because we're going to talk through why do people have these struggles? Why are these struggles so common among all the salespeople in all these different industries? And then what are some very specific things we can do in our conversations to help that? Because really, it's less about our product and service. I know if we have good products and services, I promise you it's less about your product and service, and it's more about your interaction with your prospects and buyers. We kind of repeat that a little bit because people always want to say, well, if I had better products and services or had a better economy and so on. It's less about your products and services, and it's more about your interaction with your prospects. And so how do we improve the interaction? Because we're all dealing with humans. And I gotta tell you, the humans right now are a little bit more scared, a little bit more frustrated with what's going on. And if you look at the main deal that's going on with COVID, it's not like we're still not dealing with humans, but humans they're a little bit, they're concerned. They have no idea what the future's gonna be like. And so we have two main things that are going on in sales. One is the medium of communication has changed quite a bit. Right? We're not seeing people face-to-face as much anymore. That's one thing. So we're having to do things virtually, or having to do things over the phone, or we're having to do email. That's the one main thing. The other thing is, as the decisions are being pushed out a little bit, people are not buying for the nice to have now, they're buying for the need to have. And then also the decision makers have gone up a level in many cases, unless you're dealing directly with an owner. All right, so let's talk through first and foremost, what is going on with our current reality. And when we think about salespeople in general, most salespeople, if you're not taught a system, most salespeople follow what we call a traditional way of selling. You're not taught to do anything different. And so it's almost like I say we're sleepwalking through life. The buyers kind of expect us to do certain things. Buyers could be any type of people. It doesn't have to be purchasing, right? It could be a business owner, it could be a manager. There's all kinds of different type of buyers. But buyers in general expect salespeople to do certain things. And when they see those certain things, they do certain things. And so there's almost like a sleepwalking going on where people are kind of just going about their patterns, and they're very unproductive. And it's not helping you guys decide whether you can help them or not. So let me kind of give you an idea what these patterns look like. All right, so I'm going to try to write on this, but again, I'm going to scribble scrabble. So if you're looking at this, you may not be able to read it completely. You just kind of go with me. Okay, so typical salespeople tend to do certain things. They tend to, when they have an opportunity, they tend to look for things like needs. Right? This may not be perfectly you, but most salespeople look for things like needs. They look for things that people say they need. How can I help you? What are you looking for? What do you need? And so, and that's about the most of the qualification that most salespeople do. Maybe they ask a few more questions around specifically what do you need. They ask some logistical questions. But once most salespeople lightly figure out what people need, then they present, right? Some way, shape, or form. They present a solution, right? That seems kind of normal. Figure out kind of what they need. They tell us what they need. They're pretty eager. We present a solution. It matches their needs. And then the next thing we do is we try to close business. And so very easy process for most salespeople, right? What are they looking for? What are they telling me they need? I'm going to figure it out. And then when they tell me that, I give them some sort of proposal, some sort of demo, some sort of presentation, and then I try to close the business. Now what we find is that this is not a very productive way to do it, because only about 2 out of 10 ever get closed on your non-loyal customers. Because if you look at the industry closing rates, it's roughly about 15 to 20%, and I don't care what industry it's in. It's crazy how it's almost the same. And if you take non-loyal clients out and you put your closing rates in, which is the amount you close per proposal, per demonstration, it's generally 15 to 20%. So if we don't close, what we find we're doing is we're handling a bunch of objections. Okay? And there's a lot of objections going on right now. Objections like, that price is a little bit too high. Now, you know, it's just really not a good time. Or I'm gonna have to go talk to somebody else. Or we're gonna stay with who we're using right now. And then our job is to try to convince them, the stereotypical salesperson will try to convince them why they should go with us. You know, they say their price is too high, we're supposed to tell them, here's the value you're gonna get. Now, here's what we do know, is that when we try to convince somebody, we try to overcome an objection, many times another one comes. And if you overcome that one, many times another one comes. And this goes back and forth until such time as they either give up, right? They either give up or they tell us, hey, we'll think about this, get back with us. And the last thing we do as salespeople is we follow up, okay? And many salespeople pride themselves on being really good at following up. But really what this is, and we call it chase, right? Chase mode. And some of you guys you might actually think, oh my gosh, I do chase a whole lot. I know I call it follow up because it sounds professional, but I feel like I'm chasing all the time. Most salespeople operate within the confines of this type of process and system. If you are not taught how to do anything in sales, you weren't taught a process, you would do this because you're naturally a human. You naturally want to figure out what people need. You naturally want to give them a solution to figure out how you can help them. You naturally want to say, hey, do you want to do this or not? And then when they tell you your baby's ugly, which are called objections, you naturally want to fight with them a little bit and tell them that it's not. Okay? And then whenever they say things like follow up with me, you're like, okay, sweet, I'll follow up with you, because that sounds like hope. And so this is how most salespeople do it. Now, to the fact that it's not very productive, and right now we need productivity, we know it's not productive because we only close about 1.5 to 2 out of 10 on these. Now, if I'm drawing, what's interesting about this is just a standard pattern that that salespeople do. And if you think about this, and you want to think about what the buyers are doing, you can flip and you can talk about the buyer's process. Now, when we're doing all this great stuff as salespeople, we're trying to find out needs, we're trying to present great solutions, we're trying to close business, we're trying to overcome objections, we're trying to figure out what motivates them. Then we wind up chasing them and following up. Now, the buyers they have their own process. Okay, so I'm just going to write the word mislead up here because I think it's really, really important. Okay, typically what buyers do is they mislead us. All right, that doesn't mean they're bad people, and they mislead us in one of two ways. The first way they mislead us is they under-exaggerate interest. They, even though they could have the worst problem in the world that needs a solution you have, you ask them if they're having any issues, they say things like, I'm good, I got no issues, I got no problems. Why do they do that? Because they don't want a salesperson to take advantage of them. They've been taken advantage of by so many salespeople. They're afraid that if they tell someone they're having all kinds of problems too quick, if they get vulnerable, right, then they're going to be taken advantage of by a salesperson. Now, I know you wouldn't do that, but they've had so many experiences where people have done that. They've watched so many movies about bad salespeople, and they've heard their parents say over and over, don't trust salespeople, that they tend to mislead, and they under-exaggerate interest. They act like they got no issues when they really do. That's not a productive thing for buyers to do, but it's self-preservation. That's the first way they mislead. They also sometimes mislead the opposite. Sometimes they over-exaggerate information. They over-exaggerate. Well, that means that you might get a conversation with them and they're excited. They say, hey, look, we've heard so many good things about your product or service or your company. Can you either right now, can you virtually talk to us and tell us how you can help us? Can you send us a proposal and tell us what you think you could do for us? And so that leads into another step in the buyer's process, which is called gather information. A lot of times what buyers want to do, and it makes sense, they want to gather tons of information. They want to gather all the information about how you do things, your solution, what you do to fix problems. They also want to gather price. Now, why do they want to do that? Obviously, they need to know that. But number two is, if they're super, super positive, which is a little bit almost against the grain, the over-exaggeration of interest versus the under-exaggeration, sometimes they can take that information and they can actually use it. They can do things themselves. They can take it to your competitor and say, hey, here's some great ideas. A lot of times when they want the price, they can compare prices. They can beat the other person up that they're using right now. And so what we have to be really careful of is buyers who are not just under exaggeration of interest makes sense. Over exaggeration of interest is almost against the grain, right? Because we've been taught not to trust salespeople. When you have a prospect that's over exaggerating interest and they tell you to come in and they gather all kinds of information, once they do that, they do this thing called hope with no commitment. Okay? Now what does that mean? Hope with no commitment. Hope with no commitment says, thanks for all the information. We really appreciate it. It was awesome. We'll get back with you, but it looks real good. Don't call us. We'll call you in a couple of weeks, but it looks real good. Okay? And it's meant to be very positive for a few different reasons, right? If they're real positive, if they need more information, they can get it from you. Another reason they're real positive, they can get you off the phone or off the virtual call very quickly. Another is they don't really necessarily want to be into an objection game, right? So they're super, super positive. And once they get everything, and you get out of their office, off the phone, off the virtual call, the Zoom call, and you give them their proposal, and they give you that, the last thing they do is what we call hide. Well, in millennial terms, we call it ghost, right? Because that's the better word, right? They ghost you. They hide from you because they don't need you anymore. Now, if you look at these two systems, this is what I call it sleepwalking through life, because these two systems are occurring every single day, and it's like a pattern, right? Buyers are expecting salespeople to come and give everything away for free. They act interested. Once they get everything, they tell them, hey, this looks really, really good. We'll get back with you. And then salespeople follow up incessantly until such time as they get sick and tired of it because the buyer's hiding. Now, here's why this is not productive. It's because both parties had spent an inordinate amount of time, and the salesperson is only closing 2 out of 10, so there's 8 out of 10 that they're not closing, so that's not productive for them. Why it's not productive for the buyers is a different reason. And this is what I believe in my heart, right? If you think about buyers and why they do what they do, this would seem like a system that would not be in their best interest, but they do it because it's self-preservation, right? They gather a lot of information, they kind of do it in private, they don't really want you involved because it's self-preservation. But if you've ever had a buyer come back to you after they bought from your competitor, or if they stay with your competitor and say, wish we would have bought from you, wish we would have bought from you. And that tells you that their foolproof system that they tend to use to try to avoid being sold doesn't always work very well. In fact, when we look at these two systems that exist today, it's almost like a dance. I got to tell you, most of the time, the buyer is leading this dance. They're leading the whole process. But is that good for them? Do buyers really, really know what they want? Or do they think they know what they want? Especially right now when their emotions are running so high with the things that they need and don't need, and they're scared to death. It's my belief that salespeople need to learn how to lead this dance. And if you've seen any semblance of what I'm just talking about, of something you're doing, you're probably not leading the dance. You're probably not leading the process. You're letting them lead with the hopes that that will get you to business. But it only get you to business about 1.5 to 2 times out of 10, right? And so we know that's not how. So how do we, if we believe it makes sense, start to lead this process? And I got to tell you, we need to lead more than ever right now. We need to lead more than ever, because I think our buyers need to feel confident that they're making great decisions. And they're looking at us as a partner here, right? As a partner to help them make great decisions, versus somebody we're standing next to them, we're being collaborative, versus somebody that's trying to sell to them, right? They don't feel like has their best interest at heart. And so I believe we need to get there, but what's missing? There's 2 main things that are missing, right? One is we're not asking the right questions at the very beginning as salespeople to figure out what the real issues are, and to really hard qualify whether this is something we can help them with. Right? That's the first issue I think that we're missing. We don't really know how to ask the right questions to help us and them feel like we really understand the problems and whether we can help them. So I don't think that's, again, I think we're not doing the right, we don't have the right process to do that. The number two thing I think is more important that's missing is trust, right? I think that we're missing the trust between us and our buyers, salespeople and our buyers. And you don't have all day long to go spend time with them, go and have lunch with them to try to build trust. We have to develop trust quickly enough where they'll start to let us lead and collaborate and partner with them. So when the process I'm about to talk to you about, I'm going to give you some insights on how do we start to lead this dance? How do we lead this dance? What are some of the questions we should ask to figure out what the real issues are and whether we can really help? How do we build trust quickly, right? Very quickly, because right now, I think people need our help more than ever. I just think that they need to trust us to get there. So it's all about, you're going to see me reference Sandler, okay? I don't care what sales process you're using. All good sales processes are conversational processes. They're not necessarily a sales process. They are a conversational process. How do I have more productive conversations where there's a lot less lying? I get to ask the right questions. My prospects are misleading me so much less. They feel comfortable being vulnerable, telling me the right information, and we both can come together to figure out whether we can help them or not. And if we can't help them, it's your duty to let them know, right? It's your duty to let them know so they can figure out the best place to get help. Because the reality is we can't help everybody. And so as we go through this, you'll see me talk about some of this stuff. So if you have the slides, I'm not going to go through every one of these things today, but you'll see me walk through a little bit of a process. But I'll give you kind of the need to know versus the nice to know today, just because we have a limited amount of time. But just know that if you talk about the natural born salesperson, this is why there's no such thing as a natural born salesperson. A great salesperson has a process. They go by a process, they use a process, they're not scripted, they use a process. And they logically go in a certain order, and it should work to, one, build trust. Number two is to ask the right questions to figure out if we can help or not. So let's talk about a couple ways to build trust very quickly. And I'm going to talk about some concepts here, okay? So I'm probably in front of the slides too much, and so I'm trying to manage you guys to be able to see this and be able to see what's on the slide and see me. And maybe I probably shouldn't want you guys to see me as much before the slide. So how do we build trust? Two different things. One is, how do we connect with people? How do we connect with people? There's a concept. You can see it. It's not just Sandler concept. It's out in the world today. It's called okay versus not okay. Okay versus not okay. It's a very simple psychological concept that says that at any given time, you or another human being can feel okay or not okay. Another phrase would that be feel comfortable or not comfortable. All right. Okay words are things like comfortable, happy, confident, and so on. Not okay words are things like frustrated, disgusted, humiliated, you name them, right? We could go through and talk about it. At any given time, someone can feel okay or not okay. Our job is to help a salesperson, a buyer, who does not feel okay with us because we're a salesperson, feel more okay with us quickly. And so as you walk through some of this stuff, you'll see the concepts of okay versus not okay come out. It's my job to take someone who does not feel okay with me because I'm a salesperson and help them feel more okay with me quickly. And so I have to connect with them, and I have to set the stage for a good conversation. So how do you connect with somebody? And you guys have probably heard some of this stuff, but I'll give kind of the high level stuff of this. When you're connecting with somebody, you have to, there's certain processes in what you say and what you do that matter, but there's also behind the scenes stuff that you need to be thinking about. You need to be thinking about that most people buy from people that are like them. That's completely different than people buy from people that they like. I don't know how that one got messed up. People say, well, people buy from people they like. Yes and no, right? Whatever that means. I mean, that would infer that people buy from you because they're friends with you. What it really was meant to be is that people buy from people that are like them, because who do people trust the most? People like them. So what you have to do, and you can do this in email, you can do this on virtual calls, do this on the phone, you have to learn to be more like them. Some of the simplest things are matching style of speed, matching tone, right? matching body language if you're on a virtual call, right? Matching some of that stuff so they can be more like him. You can feel, they can at least perceive that you're more like them. You're flexing your style. So if I'm talking to somebody I talk very fast. If I'm talking to someone who talks quite a bit slower than me, then I need to slow down. I need to bring the volume down. You know, if I do not do that, there's huge disconnects. If I do not flex my style to be more like them, there could be a disconnect from the beginning. They could feel like there's something doesn't feel right here. Because I don't need that from the beginning. None of my other processes are going to work very well if I don't move my style around to match their style. Hence the reason why sometimes the Northeast struggles with the South. Because if you ask people, you know, how do you describe the people from the Northeast if you're from the South? And again, this is not necessarily true, but the perception is, well, they're really abrasive. You know, they talk fast. They're abrasive. You know, there's most of the time they use different kind of language and so on, right? You hear that. Now, of course, if you ask the people from the Northeast, what do you think about the people from the South? They say things like slow and stupid, right? And again, that doesn't mean it's true. These are perceptions, and these are kind of funny perceptions, but hopefully it proves a point. The difference between the two people, they're both humans. Just they have different ways they speak. Their body language is a little bit different. Their tone's a little bit different. Sometimes they do talk faster. That's the same way with the South. Not always, right? Many times it's just a difference in how we communicate. And our job is to learn to flex, to start to connect with them, to be more like them, and more than ever right now. The other way you do this, and again, this is not going to be a DISC session, but if you've ever heard of DISC is a personality style thing, right? So DISC is just a model. There's lots of different type of models. DISC is a model for personalities, or for people, the way people communicate and make decisions. And you split people up into sort of 4 sections. You have what's called a D, right? You have an I, you have an S, and you have C. D stands for real dominant style personalities. Really only about 14% of the world are dominant. I know that everybody thinks that everybody's dominant, but they're not. A dominant style personality is someone who just gets straight to the point, wants to get results, doesn't want a lot of small talk, just want, let's get to it, right? If you're a small talker, you need to stop doing it with this. They care about results, they care about tasks, and they want to get bottom line. So they don't care about all the details. Then I, which is roughly 35 or 36% of the world, somewhere around there, our I's are called influencers. D is called dominant. Influencer is a person who's a people person. They're gift for gab, right? They love a lot of small talk, a lot of chat. Both of these two people make decisions very quickly. The D's make a lot more logical decisions. I's make a lot more emotional decisions. S's are what's called steady relators. There's something like 26% of them or something around there. Don't get me perfect on these percentages. This is a person who loves routine. They don't make decisions very quickly. They like to make consensus decisions. That means that they like to have more than one decision maker. And they definitely are the type of person who doesn't like, they do like to have some small talk. They do like to have some empathy. They do not like just going straight to the bottom line because they can feel like someone's pushing on them really hard. That's called a steady relator. It's a very routine type person. The C is what's called a compliant, roughly about the same percentage as an S. Compliant are the people who are all into the details. They want to make sure everything's black and white. They want to make sure everything is perfect. They don't make decisions very quickly, but when they do, it's all facts-based. When you look at these 4 people, and if you really get into some of the training we talk about their fears. A D, their biggest fear is not being in control. An I, their biggest fear is social rejection. An S, their biggest fear is change. A C, their biggest fear is getting things wrong. And so their decision-making and the way they communicate is all effectively from some of those biggest fears and just their personality styles. And so what do we need to be able to do? If you can do anything, go and research, learn all about this. It's a powerful thing you start to be able to detect. And you can detect on emails, you can detect on looking on people's LinkedIn page. There's actually a tool called Crystal, C-R-Y-S-T-A-L. We don't rep it, but it's a really cool tool. I don't think it's very expensive that you can use on LinkedIn, and it will tell you someone's DISC style to pretty good accuracy. But you can look at their emails, look on LinkedIn, you can talk to them, and you can start to understand their DISC style. And when you do, you start to match that. You flex. So I'm a high ID. All right, this is me over here. Who I struggle with sometimes is people who are opposite. I struggle with SC sometimes. I have to be more detailed. I have to slow down. I make decisions quickly. They don't. I have to understand their decision process. I have to flex dramatically to be more like them. So when I'm talking to a high D, it's pretty easy. I can just pretty much be me. All right. And so that's one of the ways you guys can start to build trust really quickly, is to learn how to connect with people just on a style, right? Matching them, matching their body language, matching their tone, matching their personality style. If you guys want to learn what kind of disc style you are, you can go online and take a free one, right? We do them, but you can go online and take a free one, and you can figure out if you don't know your disc style, and you can start to understand how you communicate and what you do. And in the slides, you'll see we have a slide here on how to communicate. This is way too small to read, so I'm not going to even try, but there is a slide in here on how you communicate with different people and how they make decisions, because it really matters. A sales process is only as good as you can match the style of the other person. Because if I'm talking to an S and I'm using a sales process, some of the things I'm about to teach you, and they don't feel connected with me because I'm so different in my personality, maybe they feel like I'm being abrasive, or I'm being too quick, or I'm being too aggressive, it won't work. It'll be a disconnect, okay? And so, thank you, appreciate that. So yeah, that helps. So where do we go from here? First and foremost, we've set the foundation for the fact that we need to match styles of people. And again, I get it until you talk on the phone with them and see their emails, but there are ways to start to pick this up and pick it up quickly. But once we start to match and mirror their style, so we don't have a disconnect from them, the next thing we need to do is learn how to set up what I call a productive conversation. How do we start to set up a productive conversation? Here's the thing you got to realize is when you are talking to a buyer, they're feeling not okay with you, and because you're a salesperson, they're expecting you to do certain things to them. They're expecting you to try to convince them why your stuff's the best. They're expecting certain patterns from you. And so they're expecting to lead the whole process too. Our job is to figure out how do we set the stage to have a productive conversation from a person or persons who aren't used to a productive conversation with salespeople. They're used to taking the whole lead, misleading us, figure it out on their own. So at Sandler, we have these things called upfront contracts. That's just a buzzword for one of our pieces of our process. But an upfront contract is just an upfront agreement, almost like a social agreement, but it's an upfront agreement between two or more people about what's going to happen in this conversation. And it has two purposes to it, right? The first purpose is it sets mutual expectations about what's going to happen. The second purpose, if you do a really good upfront contract, is it reduces anxiety, right? So the first purpose, set mutual expectations. Second purpose is to reduce anxiety. Now, how do we do that? There are some very specific things if you guys can start to put into place with your conversations that will set the stage for more trust than you've ever had. Now, you got to keep doing certain things to continue building the trust, but we have to build it quickly. And so let me give you some things, all right? I'm just going to write time, agendas, and outcomes. Okay. Now you notice if I put agendas and I put outcomes and I put time. You think about the fears. Think about the fears that buyers have in dealing with salespeople. It's interesting how you can look into. There's about 4 or 5 of them that are big. And what we want to do when we do an upfront contract is we want to start to alleviate some of those things. So the first one is time. One of the biggest fears your prospects have is when it comes to their time. When it comes to their time, right? They think most prospects do not think that salespeople respect their time. They just feel like that they're going to use their time up, they're going to waste it, they're not going to respect it. So, and also, I don't think as salespeople, we always do a very good job of managing our time and being on the same page with our time when it comes to conversations with buyers. So when the good upfront contract, you have an element of time. So it may be that you're going to have a virtual conversation with somebody. Maybe it's going to be 30 minutes. You're going to make sure that you guys are both on the same page with how much time this conversation takes. And then when you get to that 25-minute mark, what you're going to do is you're going to be looking at your watch and you're going to be saying things like, look, I know we got about 5 minutes left. What should we be doing? Should we keep talking? I want to respect your time. At the beginning of the conversation, you're going to say, is 30 minutes still good? And they're going to say, yeah, that's good. Or if it's less than that, if it's more than that, they're going to tell you, but you're going to be on the same page, because what we want to show is that we respect their time, and we want to start to alleviate one of their biggest fears is that we're going to waste their time. So that's one of the pieces. The other pieces are agendas. Now I say agendas because there are really two important things with all your conversations with prospects and clients. The first one is understanding specifically what a productive conversation is. It might be a simple question at the very beginning once you find out you have 30 minutes of saying, look, let's make sure that we have a productive conversation. What's the top 2 or 3 things you want to accomplish? In order for this to be, something where you walk out of this conversation in 30 minutes and feel like that was a good one, what are the top 2 or 3 things that I need to answer, that you want to know, and so on. Now that does some great things for me. That helps prep me, especially if I do it ahead of time before I get to that meeting. But even if I did it in that meeting, it helps prep me for what's going to be important to them. Number 2, I think it's actually more important, is it helps them feel, at least perceive, and hopefully it's real, that you care. Because one of their biggest fears is that as a salesperson, you don't care about anybody but yourself. And so that's why they protect themselves. That's why they mislead. That's why they have their guard up. And so when you say things like, what is important to you? What do you want to talk about? You send a message that says, I do care, right? I care. And you're going to do that agenda first. The next agenda you're going to talk about, once they tell you specifically what they want to accomplish, is you're going to say, all right, well, here's what I'm hoping to discuss. Here's the questions I want to ask. Are you comfortable with that? I think that they want to know what's going to happen to them. If you let history prove itself, what most buyers think is going to happen is you're going to come in, strap them in, roll the film until they buy something, and you're not going to let them out, right? You're going to just convince until they find some way to kick you out. That's what they think is going to happen. And so I need to tell them ahead of time, that's not what this is about. This is about a conversation today. We have 30 minutes. I know you want to discuss these 3 things. Here's the questions I want to ask you, just to make sure that I can help. Are you comfortable with that? Right? Tell them what's going to happen to them. Let them know that this is not a big presentation coming, that you want to understand more about them and some of their situations and their problems. Last thing is outcomes. I want you to think about, if you think about Franklin Covey's Begin with the End in Mind, I want you to talk about at the very beginning of the conversation, what are the outcomes we're shooting for? What are the goals we're shooting for here? There's really only 2 outcomes in every conversation from sales. The first outcome is that we don't keep talking. There's no next step, and that's okay, right? This might be a no. Maybe it's not a no forever, but it might be a no for now. And so we need to make sure that we're transparent with each other to say, hey, look, at the end of this conversation, if it doesn't make sense to keep talking, let's just be real with each other. Let's say it's okay to tell me no. I give them the option. I'll do the same thing for you. If you think about the fear that a lot of prospects have with salespeople, their biggest fear is you're not going to take no for an answer. I'm going to have to make some stuff up. When I give them the option to tell me no, I just gave them the option to be truthful with me. It starts to build trust. The other outcome I want to make sure we discuss is that if it does make sense to have next steps, I definitely want to talk about this. And no, I don't want to just be chasing you. If we have a very specific next step virtual call or phone call to do whatever, I want to make sure that we talk about that before we leave, so we're not both reading each other's mind when we leave. So if you think about a couple of things I've just told you, one is to learn personality styles, use tools, figure out your own, match their style. Number 2 is at the very beginning of conversations, almost like at the bookends one, you take the lead and start to set up a productive conversation where they'll have a tendency to trust you more because you're going to talk about all the main things they're afraid of. If you learn to do upfront contracts, you'll see this, the communication itself will start to be a little more relaxed. It doesn't mean that it's completely relaxed, but it'll start to be relaxed, and you're setting the stage for a productive conversation. You've told them, here's the questions I'm going to ask you, and you've told them that they could tell you no. You've asked them what they want to accomplish. You're respecting their time, and then you're talking about where we're headed. So that's what we call an upfront contract. If you get good at these, it will change your conversations. And you do not have to be a natural-born salesperson to be good at upfront contracts. In fact, some of the people what we call described naturally-born salespeople are people who talk too much. They don't set up conversations. They just get in and say, want to tell people and convince people. Some of the best salespeople I've seen are introverts. They're almost a little bit process-driven. They get this and they understand it, and they make it about that other person. The people like me who are high IDs have to learn to do some of that stuff. Sometimes I think I'm my own worst enemy in that way. And so process helps me slow down, be more like them, start to build trust. And this upfront contract, I haven't even begun to ask the questions to figure out if it's a good fit yet. All I'm doing is setting the stage for a good conversation. And right now, with COVID, everybody in more of a frightened sort of position, not knowing what's going to happen. The last thing they need is feeling like you're going to be pressuring them. They want good, productive conversations where they feel like you're a partner. An upfront contract helps you get there. Now, there's three things that you need to do when it comes to asking questions right now to really qualifying an opportunity. And I'm just going to write, you're going to see this. So if you're taking notes, PBD. PBD, which stands for pain, budget, decision. This is not needs. Pain is the first step in qualifying whether you can help somebody. Pain is problems that people have, right? It's not needs. It's 6 or 7 layers deeper than needs. What are the problems that they have that you might be able to solve? And are those problems costing them any money? And are those problems personal? Because people buy because they have compelling, personal, emotional reasons to buy. People do not buy features and benefits. They buy emotionally, you know, maybe you've heard that before, and they justify everything intellectually. Right now, we have to figure out what the problems are. So if someone's having a service problem with their existing supplier, it's not just enough to say, oh, you have a service problem? Let me tell you, I can help you. You have to dig. Like, tell me about that. How long have you had it? What things have you done? You know, how's it affecting the company? Is it costing you money? If it is, how much? Right? How's it affecting you personally? There's a very systematic process to dig. If you guys want to see what this looks like, you can Google pain funnel. And there's a systematic process to really dig from what we call surface level pain to real pain to figure out if people are willing to do something about it. Pain is all about motivation. If we really, really get good at pain, we're figuring out, are people motivated to change? Most salespeople love to sell the wonderful, the gain. Let me tell you how great your life is going to be if you buy my service. Let me tell you how this is going to help you. People don't buy for that. They buy for reasons to get rid of pain. So we have to spend some time there. And we really need to be the type of salesperson that sometimes steps back a little bit. When they say, well, I'm having this problem, it's almost like, is that a big enough problem to change? You really almost have to step back and kind of ask these consultant questions. Say, look, I mean, I know you're saying it costs this much money, and this is, but I mean, is that really big enough to change? Where they're almost trying to convince you that there's enough pain to change. And so you'll never have to feel like you're convincing them. So that first step is to, again, go on Google pain funnel. You'll see Sandler. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. It'll tell you exactly how to do this. It's not a complicated thing, but there's levels to it. The difference from motivation from pain to gain is 5 times. 5 times more motivating to do something because people have pain than for gain, for pleasure, pain versus pleasure. We tended to sell the nice to have. Nobody's buying the nice to have right now. They're buying the need to have. If there's enough pain, People will change, right? And the pains today are completely different than they were 6 months ago in some people. So when you're thinking about pains and trying to ask questions, you'll see, think about what problems do we solve? And you know, one of the best emails you can ever write to somebody is to think about the problems you might solve for them and write an email and say, look, this is the type of problems we solve. Is that worth the conversation? Instead of writing, I get all these emails that say, here's the things we do. We can do A, B, C, and D. Can we have a conversation? And I'm like, that's not even relevant. I don't understand. Do the work for them. Here's the problems we solve for other people. Is this worth a conversation? That's how people think. They don't think in terms of you know, sort of the features and benefits, because people don't buy that. So that first qualifying step, if you get really good at finding pain, you'll be able to sell even in this environment. The second qualifying step is what we call budget. Budget just says, once I've figured out there's enough pain, I have to figure out whether my prospects or my clients are willing and able to invest the time, the money, and the resources to fix the problem. Right? And willing is more important than able. It's very important. Willing points to, are they motivated to do something? Even right now, when people say they have no money and no budget for anything, if there's enough pain, people come up with the money. This is how humans work. If there's enough real pain, people can come up with money to fix it. But this is still a qualifying step. It's still a qualifying step. You know, if people are not willing and able, because maybe they don't have, maybe they're at some level, they don't have the ability because they're not at a high enough level, but they could introduce you to somebody who does. But still, if they're not willing and able to invest the time, invest is a key word, time, energy, and resources to fix the problem, then it's probably not going to be a qualified deal. And you need to find that out early. The last thing you want to do is get to the end of a sales cycle and have someone say, oh my gosh, if I'd only known it was this much, we wouldn't have spent this much time on this. You spend all your valuable resources, all your valuable time, and theirs, only to find out that they could have never invested $20,000, their budget was 10. Right? And so you need to find this out, but don't do it before pain. Make sure you find pain first, because it's an irrelevant conversation without pain. Right? So you find pain, and you talk about willingness and ability, time, money, and resources, meaning will they be willing and able to spend the money, want to diffuse that bomb. And the last thing, as far as qualifying, again, PPT, we've done P, just did P, next D. D stands for decision. This is so important now. We need to understand the decision process with our prospects and our clients. It has changed. And the decision process could be who, what, when, where, why, how, but let's just concentrate on three of them. The when are they hoping to make a decision? A lot of times, depending on how much pain you find, correlates to that. When are they hoping to have whatever you're selling, implemented, delivered, etc., and when are they hoping to make a decision? The who is all involved. So important, because the who has gone up a level in many cases. It's gone up a level because people aren't spending their money as much, and when they do, they have to get different authorities. And so we have to be really good at figuring out the who. Now, there's some real tricks to figuring that out. First and foremost, not asking somebody who makes the decisions, because you're going to make them feel not okay. But, you know, if you wanted to, you could say things like, if I'm talking to Frances here and she's not on my screen, but if I'm talking to Frances and she's my prospect, I might say, Frances, my gut tells me when it comes to making decisions, you're going to be one of the main people in this process. To which she probably would say, yes, that's true. I'd say, well, great. Sometimes what happens, especially in times like these, people like to bounce ideas off other people. They like to consult with other people. I'm not sure, how does it work here? And so, you know, from there, what I'm hoping, because I've made her feel okay that she is one of the decision makers, she says things like, well, I do like to bounce ideas, you know, off of Jim, you know, off of Stephen, and so on. I said, okay, well, how do we go about having conversations with them? The who is vital in the qualifying step, because the who's have changed, right? The who's have changed. They've generally gone up a level. It's our job as professional salespeople to figure that out, because what you don't want to do is get killed later by the hidden decision maker. The objection where someone says, well, I'm not the real decision maker. You need to figure that out now. And then the what? The what is the criteria. You could almost call this almost like a how. How do they make decisions? But the what is the criteria? What's the criteria that people are going to be using to make decisions? Because the criteria has changed. What's the criteria now that you guys need to look at, hear, see, experience to feel comfortable making a decision, yes or a no, especially when people aren't spending as much money? And so if you think about a sales process, the simplest way I'm describing this is we learn to match and mirror people's styles. We learn about styles. We use upfront contracts to set really good expectations to have a good, productive conversation. So two people on the same page, we start to lead the process. We spend some time talking about pain, making sure there's enough pain to change. We'll have a conversation around money, budget, investment, if you will. And then we're going to have a conversation about your decision process. We're going to understand what's important. We're going to understand your time frames. We're going to understand all the players. And then from there, we're going to, and you see it in our system, fulfillment, we're going to present only what's needed to present to show how we can take care of the pain within their budget to the right decision makers. And we're not going to show more than we did show. We're going to show just enough. If you give too much, and you can confuse people. The last thing we do is confuse people. There's another thing called post-sell. We won't talk about today. It's how to minimize buyer's remorse. But basically, if you can learn how to do that, you can learn it over time. You can be a great salesperson. It's not a complicated process. The other thing about being a great salesperson, and I talked about this in the last webinar, there's three key pieces. It's not just techniques. We just talked about techniques, right? We talked about upfront contract. We talked about pain, budget, decision. We talked about DISC. Good techniques and skills. Two other pieces. Mindset, which is attitude. I have to be able to control my mindset. If I'm not careful, it's easy sometimes to teach people techniques. Sometimes it's hard to get them to do. Depending upon your mindset right now, if you believe you can be successful, if you believe there's market, if you believe people are buying, it's called head trash. Depending upon your mindset and your beliefs, they will dictate your actions and they'll dictate your techniques. And so you really have to get control of what we call your head trash or your belief systems. If you don't believe that there's a market out there, it doesn't matter what techniques you use. You need to tell yourself what to believe. And you need to go out there and think about the fact that is my mindset the right mindset, or what mindset do I need to have? Because if you're not careful, it will be a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's called a belief wheel, where if you believe that nobody's buying, I promise you'll make it true. You'll prove it because you have to. The other part is not just attitude, not just your mindsets, but behavior. This is the other element. Behavior has consistent things like goals in your plan, in your action. Great salespeople have goals. They have short-term and long-term goals. They're striving towards something. And from those goals, they put a behavioral plan in place, and they hold themselves accountable through action to do it. And they're gutsy. Great salespeople, they're not gutsy all the time. 5 seconds of guts. Every once in a while makes all the difference in the world. They're disciplined. And I'm not that disciplined. I'm trying to get better and better. But great ones are disciplined. And the last thing is they have a lot of vitality, a lot of energy, and they do things to make sure they keep their energy level up. So we call this BAT. But really it starts with, what are my goals? What's the why? What am I striving towards? What behaviors do I need to put in place and what action? That's the behavior triangle. Attitude, behavior, techniques. Success triangle, right? Last couple of things, because we're going to run out of time. We already talked about head trash, right? We have a Sandler rule that says if your foot hurts, you're probably standing on your own toe, which really means that if you're not succeeding in sales right now, if you're not succeeding in business, it's probably, we have to take self-responsibility for the things that we haven't done or the things we're not doing. Until we take self-responsibility for these things, we can't change it. We'll always blame other things. Oh man, my gosh, if COVID weren't here, we'd really be doing a lot better. Well, we have to deal with that. So we'll take your self-responsibility that maybe we were in an industry that we didn't know could get hurt by this. So what can we do different? What can we do different? Right? Or if I'm struggling with getting a hold of prospects and getting called back, I have to take responsibility. What am I not doing that I need to be doing? What do I need to go learn, right? Because if I don't take self-responsibility, then I'm discharging blame. And that's what we call head trash. And so I'm not going to go into the care stuff. We talked about that last time, but here's the last few things. And I know that if we have questions, we'll answer. World-class salespeople. Okay? And you already heard me talk about these things, so I'll kind of quickly, briefly go over these. And then at the very end, you guys, if you have the slide deck, I'll invite you guys. If you guys want some more information about this, we can get this. But here's 5 things that world-class salespeople do. Number 1, they talk to themselves. They tell themselves what they need to believe. All right? They don't listen to themselves. They don't listen to all the negative thoughts that keep coming up in their heads. They tell themselves what they need to believe. Because if they just listen to themselves, it'll be 85% negative. And that's maybe even more than that right now. Number 2 is they understand the problems they solve. They understand the problems they solve. They know how to go after and talk to prospects by saying, here's the problems we solve. Are these worth a conversation? But if you don't know the problems you solve, it's hard to go out and get people motivated to have conversations with you. It makes prospecting really tough because then it's all about you trying to sell on game and people aren't buying on game. Number 3 is they diffuse bombs. Now bombs are things like price coming up at the very end where it's too much money. And not understanding all the decision makers. Pain budget decision, those are bombs. We diffuse bombs before they blow up. Number 4, they have a system for selling. They don't wing it. Salespeople who say they wing sales, I just kind of laugh. Oh, I'm spontaneous. I just wing it. I don't like to have a process. The most world-class athletes in the world have processes. The world-class people who are really good, they do have process. They do not wing it, right? And so they have selling systems. It doesn't mean that you can't have your own style that works for you, but you have a system for knowing what's working, not working, how to get better. Last is they follow their cookbook, which is their behaviors. They know what to do on a daily basis to be successful. It's incremental behaviors. It's not huge behaviors, huge goals every day. It's incremental. If I need to send 5 emails every single day, I time block it and I do it. If that's what it's going to take for me to be successful, I get it done. I make it a priority. Right? If it's a cookbook for how to get in shape, then I know exactly how many times I need to go to the gym. Now, I may not be perfect, but if I fail, I get back on and keep doing it again. But they know what they have to do to be successful. So that's hopefully this helped you. Francis, I'll invite you to come back on, and then I'll answer any questions. And then one more thing before we let people go. So I appreciate you guys so far. And we have questions that you want me to answer?
I do. Thank you so much, Troy. That was very, very helpful. The first question that we have is, if you are in the chase mode and the prospect starts ghosting you, how long should you continue to follow up? And is it okay to give a final follow-up message? And lastly, how can we use these strategies to get an answer, even if it's no?
Okay, that's a great question. So here's the way I would tell you that reach out to, people are busy, people have things going on. So if you reach out to them over a period of a couple of weeks, a couple of times, and if you had at least an agreement they were supposed to get back with you and they didn't get back with you, now you have to have had that agreement, right? But if they agreed to get back with you and they haven't got back with you, you wait a couple of weeks and send a couple of emails. And then the best thing in the world is to send this final email. And you can do this in voicemail too. And a final email might sound something like this. If I'm sending it to you, Francis, it might say, Francis, hey, it's destroyed. Have reached out to you a couple times. I haven't heard back. Look, that's okay. I know you're really, really busy. I know that we had talked about getting back together for an answer a couple weeks ago. Since I haven't heard back from you, I can kind of only assume that you decided to go in a different direction. So with that said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to close the file. I'm not going to contact you anymore about this specific situation, this specific deal. If I've made a poor assumption, let me know. If not, hey, I wish you well and look forward to the next time. And so here's the thing. You need to do the no. You need to break up with them. 2 things will happen. Either they don't email you back, which it's a no, right? Or they do email you back. And in the email back, they say either one of 2 things. Yes, it's a no, and that's fine. I'd rather no. Or number 2 is they say, you know what, Troy, it's not a no. Here's what's changed. Here's what we need to do different. But what you're doing with that email is you're flushing the truth out. And so that's what I would tell people to do. Don't send that email, this close the file email within 2 days after someone said they were going to contact you. You look like you're off your meds, right? And so that's the advice I'd give.
Good. And then I've got another question here. Can you give an example of the pain relievers for selling intangibles like insurance, membership organizations, et cetera?
So the pain indicators, meaning like what are some of the pains that someone might have when it comes to selling
pain
insurance?
relievers.
Yeah, pain relievers or pain indicators. So
relievers.
So I'm not quite sure what that really means when someone's asking that. I can, like what pain, you got to think in terms of if I'm selling insurance, what are the problems that people have? They're going to make them, there's two different ways to look at this. One is what are the problems that they're going to have? They're going to make them want to switch from who they're currently using right now. I got to think in terms of what problem would they have? Maybe I'm not getting that good a service from my existing insurance provider, right? And so maybe that's one thing. Quite possibly, maybe you might sell insurance that helps people save for college, and they haven't done a good job saving for college. They haven't saved for certain things, so there's certain insurance products you can sell. So we have to kind of look at it from what are the problems that they would have at a surface level that might warrant them to make a change and buy from you, right? So that's the kind of way I think about it. And it always generally is kind of if they're working with somebody, what are the issues that are going to make them switch? Or what are some of the things that they haven't put in place that they need to put in place that you can start a conversation with them about? So that's how I would say insurance.
Great. I've got another good question here is, with budgets being cut and with everyone going virtual and doing a lot of things for free, what is your recommendation for businesses addressing the cost of goods, services, and memberships?
Is that a specific industry that we're talking about?
No, just in general.
Look, I know a lot of people are doing things for free, but what we do know is that what you get for free is generally not what you're going to get if you paid. My advice for people right now in this day and age is to look for pain. Like look for pain, dig for pain, get it where you understand the motivations of why people would change. Then people are still spending money. They're still spending money, but they're spending money only in places that they have a priority. So, and just because they have pain doesn't mean that they're willing to do something about it, right? And so you have to not only look for pain, but you have to make sure they're willing to change. And so what you find is salespeople are not struggling in this day and age because they're finding tons of pain. What they're struggling is because they haven't done a good job of finding pain and people aren't buying the nice to have, right? The chamber still has its lights on. Right? I mean, the lights still stay on because if you don't pay for the bill, the lights go out, right? That's pain. It's like my air conditioner in my house. If I don't pay for it, that's pain. And so people are still spending money. They're just prioritizing it differently. And so we have to be very succinct and arrow-based, looking for the pain. And if the people that we're talking to don't have enough pain to change, go on to the next person. It doesn't mean that you can't come back one day for them. They just may not have enough to change. And so I don't know if that helps a little bit.
It does. And then earlier, I meant to ask, but someone asked, what does UFC mean again?
Upfront contract.
Upfront contract.
Upfront agreement between two or more humans about what's going to happen, or what's going to happen in this conversation. And I'm using that as a way to start to lead the process, to start to be on the same page with expectations and building trust. If people on this call don't do anything but learn how to match someone's style, learn how to do an upfront contract, find a little bit of pain, they'll be heads and tails above every other salesperson. Because most salespeople do it the old-fashioned way because they've never been taught or even think about it. They just say, well, I just do it my way and it works. Well, I can tell you, it's not working as much anymore. So, perfect.
Great. Well, we have run out of time, but I wanted to remind everybody that Troy's PowerPoint presentation will be on our website, and you have his contact information back there if you want to get a hold of him for any other questions that we did not get to ask. But I thank you, Troy. Before I close, is there any closing remarks that you would like to remind or tell folks?
Yeah, I appreciate it. So you guys do have my contact. If you want to have a conversation with us, you can email me. It'll be a brief one. We'll have a 10 or 15 minute conversation, understand a little bit more about what you do and whether we can help or not. A lot of times right now, we don't go anywhere from that conversation, but sometimes we do. So if you actually do want to have a conversation and you say, look, I'm really looking to take it to the next level. I really want to figure this out. and there's no time like the present, then email me and let's have a short conversation. There's no obligation. Number two is, if you don't want to, don't worry, don't do it to be nice. Number two is, if you guys want some free content from Sandler, and we're not going to spam you, then you can sign up, and it's on there, www.iss, it's on the sheet, .sandler.com/sell. And you'll get a year subscription of a lot of Sandler content. And so if you don't want anything and you just want some more content, jump on there and get that. I mean, look, maybe you can find some of the things that might be able to help you in this tough world right now. So I really appreciate it. It's such an honor for you guys letting me, and hopefully the participants got some value out of it.
I think they did. And I'm taking away that we do have to have a different mindset right now, especially during COVID, and change our way of being a salesperson. And I'm glad to know that you don't have to be a born salesman, that it is something that you can be taught and mold into the right one. But I love the fact that you mentioned it's about trust. And more so than ever, we all have to have that trust and give everyone else the value that they need. So thank you so much, for Troy, for joining us today. All of our other webinars are on our website, and then we also have our Easton Facebook group page for any businesses that want to be promoted, or for us to help you promote your services and things like that. So have a great day, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.